All right, let's dive into something truly fascinating today. We're going to explore a really wild claim that sits right at the intersection of ancient faith and modern computers. The idea that the Quran, one of the most influential books on the planet, is hiding a secret mathematical code. So let's just get right to the big question, the one that's had scholars, believers, and skeptics buzzing for decades. Is it possible? Could a text from the 7th century really have a complex mathematical signature woven right into its very fabric? And I mean, where did this idea even come from? Well, you might be thinking this is some ancient discovery, right? Something found in a dusty scroll? Nope. This all came to light in 1974. A biochemist named Rashad Khalifa, using computer analysis, announced he'd found something incredible, a hidden, intricate mathematical structure that nobody had seen before. And believe it or not, this entire massive theory, it all boils down to this one single kind of cryptic verse. Now, traditionally, this line is understood to be about the guardians of hell, but Khalifa saw something else entirely. He believed this was the master key, the secret decoder ring to a divine mathematical code.
Okay, so what is this so-called Code 19? What's the actual evidence? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of what proponents point to as proof of a mathematical miracle.
First up, let's just look at the basic structure of the book itself. The Quran has a total of 114 chapters, or what are known as surahs. And here's the first aha moment for believers in the code. 114, well, it just so happens to be a perfect multiple of 19. Now, on its own, you might say, okay, that could be a coincidence. But they argue this is just the very first thread in a much, much larger mathematical tapestry. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper. Let's look at one of the most important words in the entire text, the Arabic word for God, Allah. It appears in total 2,698 times. And there it is again. It's another perfect multiple of 19. For people who believe in the code, this is huge. You have the total number of chapters and the total count of the word for God, and both of them line up perfectly with this one key number. And it doesn't stop there. Not by a long shot. They point to all sorts of things. The famous opening phrase, the Bismillah, has exactly 19 letters. Divine names like the Merciful appear a number of times that's a multiple of 19. Even if you add up all the chapter numbers, 1 plus 2 plus 3 and so on, the total is, you guessed it, a multiple of 19. The list goes on and on. Okay, that all sounds pretty compelling, right? But hold on, because this is where the story takes a sharp turn. This theory is not widely accepted. In fact, it's incredibly controversial, and the case against it is pretty strong too. Yeah, and critics are not shy about this. Many mainstream scholars and skeptics use some pretty strong language, calling the whole thing a hoax. Their main accusation? That the only way to get these perfect numbers is by messing with the data. So what does that messing with the data actually look like? Well, here's a classic example. There's a claim that the letter Nun in chapter 68 appears a number of times that's divisible by 19. But critics say, wait a minute, that count only works if you change the standard accepted spelling of one of the words to add an extra Nun that isn't there in the established manuscripts. So what the skeptics are saying is, this is basically a textbook example of confirmation bias. You're just looking for the patterns you want to see. In a text this huge, with hundreds of thousands of words, you could probably find patterns for almost any number if you're willing to be a little flexible. And when you factor in disagreements about historical word counts and slight variations in ancient manuscripts, well, those perfect numbers start to look a lot less perfect. But you know, this whole thing isn't just about the number 19. It's actually part of a much bigger world, a tradition of looking for sacred numbers and codes in the Quran. And a huge piece of this puzzle for numerologists are these things called the muqatta'at. They're these individual letters at the start of 29 different chapters, like Aleph, Lam, Mim. Nobody actually knows for sure what they mean. Their purpose has been lost to history, which of course makes them the perfect candidates for theories about hidden messages and divine codes. All right, now we're going to take a quick kind of weird detour. I want you to look at this number, 1,729. In the world of math, this is a pretty famous number. It's called the taxicab number, from a cool story about two genius mathematicians. But here's the wild part, the part that makes numerologists' heads spin. If you break it down into its prime factors, you get 7, 13, and 19. And what do you know? All three of those numbers are considered really significant in Quranic numerology. At the very least, it's a pretty mind-blowing coincidence.
So after all that, we're right back where we started, at the heart of the whole debate. We've seen the incredible patterns, but we've also seen the serious criticisms. And it leaves us with two totally different ways to look at this.
It really just boils down to two perspectives. One side says, look, these patterns are way too frequent, way too complex to just be random chance. This is a divine fingerprint. The other side says, no, this is a human invention. It's wishful thinking and cherry-picking data to make a pattern that isn't really there.
And you know, that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating. It doesn't just ask you to believe it or reject it out of hand. Instead, it kind of challenges you to have both an open mind and a critical one, to dig into the claims for yourself and see where the evidence actually leads.
And in the end, that's the real question we're left with, isn't it? When you're looking at the world, where exactly do you draw the line between a pattern that has real meaning and one that's just a remarkable, beautiful coincidence? That's the thought we'll leave you with. Thanks for joining this explainer.